Level 989.
Welcome to 989 on Health, where you don't need years of university to understand the latest news about health and related subjects. We've created a list of helpful links on today's topic at our website, level989.com, and you can also find those links in the podcast playing app you're using right now.
This informal discussion shares our personal views. Don't rely on this podcast as an alternative to medical advice from a professional healthcare provider. For the full disclaimer, please see our website.
I'm Mike Davalos, just an average Joe, and the fine gentleman here with me is anything but average. It's Brandon Weintraub, a primary care physician. Good afternoon, Mr. Brandon.
And good afternoon to you, Mike.
Today we're going to do an off-the-cuff chat about a quick topic. Warning, we have not spent the hours and hours of research that most episodes require. This is just two dudes talking. Today we have a typical frustrating problem that seems to happen with any food product you might name. It's ambrosia, it'll give you health and long life. It's poison, and it will damn you to the deepest pits of Hades. So apparently, margarine will kill you. Fun story, my grandma used to call it Oleo. No one knows why. I kid, it's short for oleomargarine. Can't remember where I read this. It was years ago now. In the early days of the food industry in the US, fake foods had to be clearly labeled as such, and they were dyed distinctive colors to make sure customers knew what they were buying. For example, margarine had to be pink. But food lobbyists soon encouraged lawmakers to change the rules in their favor. Okay, Brandon, what's up with this one? Fake butter's killing people now?
I think fake butter has been killing people for some time now. So, this article is on a topic that I've actually discussed in the past, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm thrilled to be vindicated in the statements I have made. It is about butter being unlikely to harm your health, but margarine could be deadly. This is obviously going to be a somewhat sensationalized piece, but not the study itself. It's about a study that found that saturated fat that's found in butter or meat or cream, it's unlikely to kill you, but margarine just might. So, the article states, although traditionally dietitians have advised people to cut down on animal fats, the biggest ever study has shown that it does not increase the risk of stroke, heart disease, or diabetes. However, trans fats found in processed foods like margarine raises the risk of death by 34%. For years, everyone has been advised to cut out fats, said study lead author Dr. Russell D'Souza, an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Epidemiology and Biostatistics at McMaster University in Canada. Trans fats have no health benefits and pose a significant risk for heart disease, but the case for saturated fat is less clear. That said, we aren't advocating an increase of the allowance for saturated fats in dietary guidelines, as we don't see evidence that higher limits would be specifically beneficial to health.
You know, I think people are confused very often when it comes to fat, because there's 5 different types of fat, and some kill you and some are good for you. I've said before about other things that they need to be rebranded or renamed.
Indeed, that's so.
I think trans fats needs a different name and animal fats needs a different name. Maybe we just stop using the word fat at all and have something completely different and distinct so that you can
just pull a complete reset and let people
right
kind of get an idea of what's going on from the beginning, from stage 1.
I don't know if it's possible, but fat will kill you. No, fat's good for you. Wait, what?
I believe in past episodes I've managed to mention that there are some pretty nasty situations and some pretty nasty processes involved in getting some of the butter substitutes, some of the saturated fat substitutes, ready for consumption by your average person. In particular, I don't know how long ago it was, but I feel like it can't be that long ago. I seem to remember the Oleo chips coming out, the idea that trans fats were going to replace saturated fats. They worked just as well, but were non-reactive and your body didn't digest them, and everyone was super excited.
Right. It'll just go right through you.
And yes, indeed, the Oleo chips did go straight through you. And there's a good reason for that. With the Oleo fats, essentially what they do, and I'll try not to go over the top with the science here, is they bombard chains of fatty acids with hydrogen and it locks them up. It essentially forces them to be non-reactive, creates a great oil that you can use to fry things up, and because it's absolutely unusable by the body, it will pass right through you and theoretically it won't affect your health. In point of fact, as the study shows, the trans fats actually can do some pretty significant harm to the body. It was, I think, a study in 1970 that originally came out with the idea that only saturated fats that did all the harm. They were the biggest danger to modern society since, I don't know, the invention of weapons. I haven't the foggiest. But this study in 1970 is kind of what a lot of modern nutrition has based itself off of. The idea that eating these saturated fats, these animal fats, butter and milk and cream, that it's going to harm your heart. All of this information is based off of this one study in 1970, which is fine, except that the study was pretty faulty. It did a study of, I think, 21 different locations where they were doing this study, and 6 of them made it into the study. And I think something like 12 or 14 or something like that didn't match with their theory. So they just ignored the data. And we're coming to find out now, lo and behold, that these saturated fats don't seem to affect the risk of heart failure or stroke or diabetes at all. Not statistically, at least. And that's what's happening. So these trans fats, which were around for a while and have since kind of been pulled back, there's no pure trans fats really available on the market for use anymore. Restaurants don't cook with them so much, but they are a greater danger than your delicious animal fats.
You know, I'm getting confused even as you're talking, and I'm looking at the article between trans fats and saturated fats, and I'm having the problem I was just mentioning, you know? It should be bad fats and good fats.
Which would be great. And unfortunately, even that's difficult because you've got your unsaturated, you've got your saturated, you've got your polyunsaturated. What in the world are we talking about? And, it's something probably worth discussing at a later date. But in terms of the study, the important bits are that the saturated fats, these are the ones that I've kind of called good for some time. They are the ones that are generally found in meat sources. So butters, which come from cream and milk. Cream itself has a fair amount of saturated fat. And the meat that you get with your steak or your chicken that's, makes it so deliciously crispy and wonderful. Those are all your saturated fats. And for the longest time, people who had a heart condition or who are at risk of a cardiac event have been told to cut down on all of the saturated fats, keep it to a very, very small amount. And naturally, if you take something away, people are going to find something to replace it. So they go to these margarines that have the trans fats, also known as trans unsaturated fats.
I'm sure some of them have a big heart healthy sticker on them, right?
And I guarantee you that that's the case. And that's because from the 1970s, we've been told that saturated fats are bad. So no cheese, no regular butter. Replace it with this. It's not a saturated fat. And it's been an ongoing problem, especially since now that we've seen this new research, which I think it was a cross study. So they were looking at, I think, 50 studies, and altogether it included a batch of people, something like 1 million people across all the studies that they included. And we're seeing that, all those heart healthy stickers on the margarine, probably not quite as accurate as they potentially could be.
A problem with that would be even after, let's say, they realize that's bad, health officials and food companies, they take the sticker off. People just keep buying what they've been buying for years. That's just the butter I grab. It's
very difficult to overcome 30 years of research, let alone a fact that's been around, since the 1970s. Any health fact that's been built into the kind of the fundamentals of what your doctor will tell you in terms of nutrition, that's going to be hard to overturn. Just because it's been there for so long, it's easy to kind of dismiss it. It's natural to want to go, well, I've been told this since I was born. What do I do now? And I don't want to believe you. No, surely you haven't been that wrong for that long.
That would suck to be. I've been telling people to do this for years, and now it's killing them.
And I think to a certain degree, that's also why the article that we're reading, the very first thing that the head of the study says is that we are not advocating an increase of the allowance for saturated fats, but we haven't seen any real danger to having the saturated fats either. Even for the scientists and the medical researchers who are doing these studies, it's kind of that ingrained natural inclination. We have to be careful not to tell people to just go and eat tons of fat now, because what happens if it does somehow harm them?
Right. It's just fodder for a future study about how animal fats kill you.
Right. It's really difficult to overcome that, even for the people who are coming up with the information.
Now, there's a lot of people who are lactose intolerant.
Indeed, there are.
There's some people in your household that are lactose intolerant.
Indeed, there are.
So I'm thinking they're not eating butter. Are they eating margarine?
Unfortunately, yes. For the most part, they use a soy-free margarine product that theoretically doesn't have any trans fats, but there's still a number of unpleasant processes that these fake butters, these margarines, have to go through to make them solid, because otherwise they're just a bunch of liquid oils that would just separate and not be spreadable. So there's still a couple of processes that are worrisome to create these solid butter products. But what do? You find the best one you can, and that's what you use.
So being lactose intolerant might be sending a bunch of people who wouldn't otherwise be eating margarine
to start eating margarine. And yes, indeed, that's possible. And so it seems almost counterintuitive, but for a lot of cooking projects, I actually do. I say, if you've got a rendered fat that you use on a regular basis. So I know that the mother and grandmother of one of my exes, that she used to keep all of the bacon fat that she used. She'd create bacon, and there's the fat, and she'd keep it in the fridge.
I keep it in the freezer, yeah.
And using that as a cooking medium instead of one of the margarines may actually be okay. It's not a great idea to start drinking this stuff, but to use it instead of a margarine product that may or may not contain these trans fats, I generally tell my patients it's okay to have a little bit of saturated fat. It's healthy. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you.
Not in the same way that these trans fats will.
Correct. Yeah. And so, there's a bunch of other oils out there, and you have to start looking at omega-3 fatty acids versus omega-6 fatty acids, and what do I get, and how do I do it? And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is worth looking at the other sources of fats and oils rather than just reaching for your usual margarine.
So one thing I wonder.
Yes, sir.
If you wanted to cut anything butter or margarine-like, I guess for some people that would work. Is it necessary in some? If I want to make certain dishes, I absolutely have to use something with these properties.
Any baking you do, you have to have some form of fat. But I say recently, within the last 6 months, honestly, I'd never heard of leaf fat, something like that. And it's used in a lot of...
leaf as in on a tree?
Yeah, like leaf. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, what in the world is that? And it's just the rendered fat from around the kidneys, usually like cow or pig. And apparently this rendered fat is generally used in a lot of baking applications. French bakers often use it instead of some of the butters that we would ordinarily see.
I find it hard to believe you hadn't heard of this before, being such a foodie.
I hadn't. I'd heard of the fat itself, but I'd never heard it called leaf. I wish I knew what it was. I want to say it was leaf fat. I got to look it up now.
It's not ghee, is it?
No. Ghee is just rendered butter.
Oh, well. But I knew that word. I think you should be impressed.
Leaf fat. Is it called leaf fat? It is. It is in fact called leaf fat. It is the dense fat in layers around the kidneys of some animals, especially pigs. Leaf lard. That's what it was. Leaf lard.
When you peel it off, is it leaf-shaped or something?
Yes, they do. They cut off the fats around the kidneys and then render it down. And they make all sorts of wonderfully delicious treats with it. And so there are saturated fat replacements available that aren't a margarine. Now, in terms of spreading it on your toast, yeah, that's going to be a little trickier.
Probably going to be hard as a rock from the fridge, right?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to suggest people let's go ahead and just spread some bacon lard.
My toast every day.
All over my delicious bread. But I guess that's the fried slice, right? I mean, cook it up. I don't know. That's, I guess, the big problem here is that with this new information, do I then switch back over to butter? Do I stick with margarine if I have to? What do I do?
Now you say that fat is necessary in baking. Should I be eating baked foods? I think that should be pretty clearly in the bad foods category.
Even like a loaf of bread?
Well, isn't bread horrible and evil, I thought?
Nonsense. It may not be great for people who are gluten intolerant, but it's a staple food. It's a grain. It's fine. I do not advocate the avoidance of bread.
It's made of seeds. We're not meant to live on seeds, sir.
I think baked goods are okay. Whether or not they're the healthiest thing in the world, I think it's going to depend on how much you eat, just like anything else. And that's where I was going, in fact, is that, I don't think people need to immediately rush out and switch to nothing but saturated fats. It's easy to want to just switch from one immediately to another, but I think it's worth noting more that the saturated fats may not be the end of the world, and it's worth incorporating a moderate amount rather than trying to do a wholehearted avoidance. And that's the way it is with most foods.
Right.
Moderation. That's my motto. Moderation.
You should follow that. That's a good rule. Yeah.
I should try. And so at the end of the article, there's actually a little summary here by Victoria Taylor, who was apparently a senior dietitian at the British Heart Foundation, and she actually summed it up pretty nicely. While saturated fats were not robustly associated with total deaths from CHD, which is chronic heart disease, this does not mean we should all go back to eating butter. The studies that this review is based on can't show cause and effect. Rather, it highlights how difficult it is to understand the true relationship between diet and our health. Diets high in saturated fats are linked to raised cholesterol levels, a risk factor for CHD. But when one nutrient is reduced, it will be replaced by another, and depending on what this is, it can have positive or negative health consequences. And there you have it. Basically, the poster for moderation. You don't have to run out and stop all margarine products, but incorporating a little bit more saturated fats in your regular diet is going to be okay.
I don't really like this article.
No?
It seems really typical to me. This might be bad for you, but don't cut it out completely because we're not sure what not doing that will do.
It might be good for you.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I think that's going to be the way it is for any food-based study. And then, even worse, whenever you have something that has, we just discussed it, it's so ingrained in what dietitians, doctors, it's so ingrained in what they've been told for so long and what they've been telling patients. They are terrified. It's just scary to go out and tell your patients, well, yeah, go ahead and go hog wild with your saturated fats because you've been against these saturated fats for so long. What are you going to do? So I think that's the nature of this article, in fact, is that it goes against what everyone's been told for so long that even the researchers who have the numbers in front of them are hesitant to say, go ahead and eat more saturated fat. It's okay. And that's basically what I've been doing for my patients is, go ahead, switch over to more saturated fats. I think you're going to be okay. And yeah, it's a risk, and I don't tell them to go out and, binge, but at the same time, I think it's probably better if the option is available to switch to saturated fats than to go with some of these trans fats alternatives.
That's all the time we have for today. These short episodes are a brief overview of very complex topics. Everything we say is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Licensed healthcare professionals should advise you and be aware of changes you're planning to make to any aspect of your healthcare. Every person's needs are different. The links to references we've made about news articles, medical studies, and other materials can be found at level989.com, along with our contact information and the complete Don't Take Medical Advice from Podcasts disclaimer. Don't forget to take a moment to rate or review us on iTunes or give us a mention on social media. We can't inform everyone if they don't know we exist. Thanks for listening, and now go health yourself.